Fleetmaster Kalen settled into the command throne of the Star Reaper Harbinger, a low, clicking laugh rumbling through his armored frame. 300 ships, the very pride of the Vorlag Dominion, were cutting through the black toward the tiny blue marble they called Earth. The mission was as simple as it was instinctual, a principle baked into the Vorlag way of life: consume and expand. Weaker species were just resources, their worlds nothing more than stepping stones for the Dominion's glorious climb. And this next world, Earth, was supposedly loaded with heavy metals, ripe for the picking. A flicker on his console pulled at his multifaceted eyes. It was the data ghost, the so-called warning they'd pulled from the ruins of some long-dead civilization out near Cygnus X1. The file was ancient, corrupted, but the message was clear enough. It talked about a sector to avoid, a species of silent guardians, and had one chilling, almost poetic line: "Beware the patient anger of a quiet world." Kalen had broadcast the warning to the whole fleet just for a laugh, primitives and their boogeymen stories. The Vorlag had shattered empires that stretched across 1,000 suns. They had cracked open fortress worlds protected by elder races. Conquest was the only universal law that mattered, and the Vorlag were its ultimate judges. What could a species that was still chucking chemical rockets at its own moon possibly do against 300 planet killers? The fleet's laughter, a chorus of clicks and guttural chuffs, was his answer. It was the sound of total, unshakable confidence, the sound of a victory already won. The Vorlag Dominion was built on a simple, brutal idea: strength is the only truth. For millennia, they'd swept through the galaxy like a wildfire, their fleets falling on system after system, swallowing technology, enslaving populations, and stripping worlds clean. Their history was a long list of wins, each one reinforcing their belief that they were destined to rule everything. Weakness was a sickness, a flaw in the genetic code of the universe that had to be wiped out. Compassion was a fantasy. Mercy was a tactical mistake. Their trip to the Sol system was just another exercise in that same arrogance. On the Harbingers, Bridge, Kalen, and his officers looked over the first scans of Earth. The data only made their contempt grow. A single dominant species, biologically weak, broken into hundreds of bickering tribes they called nations. Their global communication network was a chaotic mess of nonsense, silly entertainment, pointless arguments, and endless streams of useless data. Their orbital defenses? A few kinetic impactors and some baby laser platforms? They were toys compared to the Dominion's standard-issue cannons. "Look at them, Science Master Vrel," Kalen chuffed, gesturing with a sharp talon at the hologram of Earth. They're busy arguing with each other while a superior force is parking on their doorstep. They're like maggots squabbling over a leaf, totally unaware of the boot that's about to come down. Vrel, an older and more cautious Vorlag, tweaked the lens over one of his eyes. "Their technological growth is uneven, Fleetmaster. They developed atomic weapons before they even truly left their own gravity well. There's a certain chaotic ferocity to them." Kalen waved a claw dismissively. "That's the sign of a chaotic, undisciplined mind, not a strategic one. And what about the warning? The sleeping giant?" Vrel pulled the data ghost's file back to the main screen. The ancient text, translated from a billion-year-old language, was full of what the Vorlog saw as mystical garbage. It didn't mention fleet sizes or weapon power, but talked about ideas. It claimed this species had mastered the art of being underestimated. It warned that their primitive appearance was a veil of patience, and that attacking them was like striking a chord that will echo with the end of your own existence. One line was especially funny. "They have locked their true nature away in their own cradle because they fear their own potential more than any outside threat." Fear their own potential? Kalen had howled with laughter when he first read it. What kind of species is afraid of its own strength? It's the rambling of a race that was too weak to make it, projecting their own failures onto some mythical protector. These humans probably wiped them out and then forgot how they did.
It!
The bridge crew had laughed with him. The logic was so simple. If humanity was so powerful, why were they still stuck in one system? Why were they still burning fossil fuels and fighting over imaginary lines on their dirt maps? No, the evidence was clear. Earth was a prize, just sitting there for the taking. The warning was just the last dying breath of a forgotten people. And in a few short cycles, the Vorlag Dominion would snuff out that whisper for good, burying it under the rubble of a conquered world. The fleet was hungry, and Earth was the feast. The drop from hyperspace was perfect. 300 jagged, black ships of the Vorlag Dominion ripped through the fabric of space at the edge of the Sol system. Their arrival was a silent, brutal statement. The star, Sul, bathed the fleet in harsh light, glinting off the hulls of cruisers, destroyers, and the monstrous flagship, the Harbinger. Initial scans confirmed everything. The gas giants were boring, the inner rocky worlds were dead, except for the third one, Earth. Blue, white, and so painfully, beautifully alive, a jewel waiting to be crushed. Long-range sensors began their deep scans, cataloging energy signatures and military targets. The results were pathetic. A few dozen satellites that looked like they belonged in a museum and a small space station. The Vorlag could have knocked it all over with their parking thrusters. "Begin planetary subjugation protocols," Kalen commanded, his voice dripping with the satisfaction of a predator. "Target their biggest energy signatures first. Let them watch their cities go dark. Let them feel the cold hand of despair before we even fire a real shot." "Fleet Master," the sensor officer interrupted, his voice a series of nervous clicks. "I have an anomaly." "An anomaly?" Kalen's tone was sharp with irritation. "Spit it out." "A single vessel. It's moving to intercept. From the direction of their fourth planet." On the main screen, an image zoomed in. It was ridiculous. The vessel was tiny, barely the size of a Vorlag fighter. Its design was insultingly simple. A smooth, featureless silver teardrop, polished, like a mirror. It had no visible guns, no obvious engines, no shield emitters. It looked less like a warship and more like modern art. Laughter erupted on the bridge. "Is that their champion?" sneered the weapons officer. "They send one unarmed shuttle to face the Dominion? Maybe it's carrying a diplomat coming to surrender." "Put it on audio," Kalen ordered, a cruel grin spreading across his face. "I want to hear them beg." The comms channel crackled, but there was no voice, just a calm, three-toned chime. Then a text message scrolled across the screen in perfect Vorlag script. "You have violated sovereign territory of the Sol system under the Terran mandate. Your presence is unauthorized and seen as hostile. This is your only warning. Turn back now." The audacity, the sheer, unbelievable nerve. The bridge fell silent, stunned not by the message, but by the gall of whoever sent it. Kalen stared at the words, his amusement souring into hot fury. They were being warned? "By this? They dare?" he whispered, his voice dangerously quiet. "They dare to warn us?" He looked at his weapons officer. "Vaporize it. Use a tertiary plasma cannon. I don't want to waste a main gun on this bug." "Yes, Fleet Master," the officer replied, his claws dancing over his console, on DAS. The screen, a bright stream of plasma shot from one of the Harbinger's forward guns. It was a casual shot, a flick of the wrist for a ship that could crack continents, but it had enough power to vaporize a small moon. The bolt crossed the gap in a blink, swallowing the tiny silver ship. The flash was blinding, but there was no explosion, no debris. As the light faded, the silver ship was still there, completely unharmed. A soft, golden shimmer, no brighter than a candle, flickered around its hull and vanished. It was a shield that had just casually soaked up a blast that should have erased it and everything within 1,000 kilometers. The laughter on the bridge was dead. Every officer just stared, their eyes wide with disbelief. "Report!" Kalen barked, a cold knot of dread tightening in his gut. "No! No effect, Fleetmaster," the weapons officer stammered. "The target shield showed a 0.001% energy fluctuation. All energy was nullified. It's not possible. The physics, the laws of thermodynamics." Before he could finish, a new message appeared from the human ship. "The Terran mandate is not a negotiation. It is a statement of fact. You have chosen poorly." And then, from the tip of the tiny silver ship, a line of light appeared. It wasn't a beam or a bolt. It was a hairline crack in reality itself, a silver thread that shot across the void and touched the hull of the Vorlog cruiser, Gore Talon, a 5-kilometer-long beast of a warship. There was no sound. No explosion. The Gore Talon just wasn't there anymore. 1 second, it was a proud engine of conquest with a crew of 12,000. The next, only empty space. The sensors didn't see debris or an energy flash. They registered nothing, a complete absence, as if the ship hadn't been destroyed, but had been deleted from the timeline. Unhappened. The idea of such a causality-violating weapon is, of course, pure science fiction, a terrifying concept with no basis in real-world events or scientific principles. Silence. A deep, soul-crushing silence fell over the bridge of the Harbinger. The air grew thick with the smell of fear. Kalen stared at the empty space where his cruiser had been, his mind refusing to accept what his eyes had just seen. That wasn't a weapon. That was a perversion of physics. That was the universe itself being used as a knife. The ancient warning screamed in his skull, no longer a fairy tale, but a prophecy, a power that defied the laws of the universe. The silence on the bridge was shattered by a single panicked gasp from a junior navigator. That one sound broke the dam, and in an instant, the disciplined command center of the Dominion's finest flagship fell into total chaos. "The Gore Talon is gone," one officer shrieked, his voice cracking with terror. "It's just gone." "What was that weapon? What was that?" another yelled, desperately trying to get a reading from the empty space. "There's nothing, no radiation, no particles, no gravity distortions, it's just empty." Kalen's mind raced, trying to find a logical reason, any explanation, for this hurricane of the impossible. A cloaking field, a teleportation weapon, but no tech he knew of could erase a 5-kilometer warship and its 12,000 crew so completely, so quietly. It was like a god had just reached down and plucked it out of existence. "Status of the human vessel," he roared, his voice trembling with fear. "Unchanged, Fleetmaster," the sensor officer cried out. "Energy signature is stable. No, wait, it's rising. I'm detecting more. Fleetmaster, I'm detecting more signatures." "More ships," Kalen demanded, a tiny spark of hope lighting in his mind. Maybe it was a trap by another empire. "No, Fleetmaster," the officer said, his voice dropping to a horrified whisper. "Not ships. Signatures. They're everywhere." On the main tactical display, the system map began to light up. First, just a flicker. Then hundreds of contacts appeared. Then thousands. Then tens of thousands. They weren't jumping in from hyperspace. They weren't decloaking. They were just appearing, as if they had been there all along, hiding in a different phase of reality, and were now simply choosing to be seen. Of course, all known data as of 2026 confirms that humanity possesses no such hidden fleets, with our presence in space limited to satellites, probes, and the ISS. They bloomed out of the darkness like a forest of thorns. From behind Jupiter, a vessel that dwarfed the Harbinger faded into view, its hull a shimmering lattice that seemed to bend starlight. From the shadow of Saturn's rings, a fleet of sleek black warships emerged, their shapes fractal and predatory. In the asteroid belt, the asteroids themselves began to move, to reform. Ancient automated drones, disguised for millennia as space rock, lit up their engines, their weapon ports glowing with that same terrifying silver light. In 60 seconds, the Vorlag Dominion's mighty fleet of 300 ships was no longer the hunter. It was the hunted. They were surrounded, outnumbered 100 to 1, by a fleet with technology so advanced it might as well have been magic. The Vorlag ships, with all their jagged edges and brutal designs, looked like crude stone axes next to the elegant, impossible shapes of the human fleet. Kalen stared at the tactical display, frozen, his mind a storm of terror and disbelief. This wasn't a fleet. This was a secret an entire species had kept for millennia. This was the sleeping giant from the warning. They hadn't been hiding in fear. They had been hiding in patience. That little blue marble wasn't a cradle. It was a cage. A self-imposed prison for a power so great they were afraid of what it would do to the rest of the galaxy. The single silver ship sent one last text transmission. The warning was your mercy. The time for mercy has passed. We are humanity, and you are trespassing. The voice of Science Master Vrel was a faint, broken croak next to him. Fleet Master. The warning. They have confined their true nature to their own cradle, for they fear their own potential. We thought it meant they feared their own strength. It meant they feared what they would become if they were ever forced to unleash it. The cold dread in Kalen's soul hardened into a single, perfect certainty. They were all going to die here. They had come for loot and glory, driven by greed, and in their arrogance, they had kicked open the door to a god's throne room and demanded tribute. This wasn't a battle. This was a reckoning. The battle, when it started, wasn't the loud, chaotic music of violence the Vorlog knew. There were no thunderous explosions, no desperate dogfights, no heroic last stands. There was only a quiet, horrifyingly efficient disassembly. It was the difference between a bar fight and an autopsy. From the human fleet, there were no waves of torpedoes or storms of lasers. Instead, silver whispers of light, just like the one that erased the Gore Talon, began to lance out across space. Each one moved with impossible purpose, striking a Vorlag vessel, and with each strike, a ship vanished. The cruiser, Worldbreaker, the destroyer, Spine Taker, the carrier, Hive Mother, all gone. Not blown up. Erased. Kalen watched the icons on his tactical display wink out of existence, one after another. There was no defense. Vorlag shields, designed to withstand the heat of a star, were useless against a weapon that didn't deliver energy, but just unwrote matter from the script of reality. Other human ships used different but equally terrifying methods. One group of black spheres projected localized gravity wells. Vorlag destroyers were caught and crushed down into singularities. No bigger than Kalen's fist, a feat of gravity manipulation far beyond any technology known to exist. Another wing of human ships, shaped like delicate crystal wings, simply phased through the Vorlag formations. As they passed, the Vorlag ships just fell apart, their molecular bonds dissolved, their crews turned to ash. The Vorlag didn't fire back. Their gunners sat at their stations, consoles screaming with targeting locks that wouldn't hold, trying to shoot at ships that seemed to be in multiple places at once. It was like trying to punch a ghost. The entire human fleet moved as one, with the grace of a single unified mind. On the bridge of the Harbinger, what was left of Vorlag discipline had completely shattered. Some were frozen in place, catatonic. Others were screaming, firing their sidearms at the view screen in fits of useless rage. "Fight back!" Kalen shrieked, the command tearing from his throat, raw and hopeless. "Fire at will! Fire everywhere!" The Harbinger unleashed everything it had. Its main planet cracker, Beam, a weapon that had melted worlds to glass, fired into the heart of the human formation. The beam, a river of pure destruction, simply flowed around the human ships as if they were rocks in a stream, not even scorching their hulls. It was then that Kalen finally understood. This wasn't a war. This was pest control. Humanity wasn't fighting them. They were dealing with them. The Vorlag's arrival wasn't a threat. It was a mess that needed to be cleaned up. The cold, calculated efficiency of it all was more terrifying than any rage could ever be. In less than 10 minutes, more than 200 Vorlag warships were gone. Only a handful remained, huddled around the Harbinger like scared children. Then, the human fleet stopped its attack, holding its position, their silence a crushing weight. A single message, the first audio they had ever received, came from the little silver ship. The voice was calm, male, and had no emotion at all. Your lesson is learned. Your fleet is broken. Your dominion will be told of its failure. Leave and do not return. The next time you violate this space, we will not stop at your fleet. We will follow you home. The threat wasn't yelled. It was stated as a simple fact. Retreat! Kalen screamed, his voice breaking. Emergency! Jump! Now! Get us out of here! The surviving Vorlag ships tore open ragged, unstable holes in space, their navigators not caring where they went, only that it was away. The Harbinger shuddered as it plunged into hyperspace, the last thing Kalen saw on his screen being the silent, watching eyes of the human fleet, and the calm, indifferent beauty of the blue planet he had been so sure he could conquer. The journey back to the heart of the Vorlag Dominion was a long, silent funeral march. Of the 300 ships that left with such swagger, fewer than 50 limped home. The Harbinger itself groaned under the stresses of a panicked jump it was never built to survive. But the physical damage was nothing compared to the psychological wound. The survivors didn't speak. They moved like ghosts, their eyes hollow, forever seeing ships and friends simply vanishing into nothing. The supreme confidence that defined their species was gone, replaced by a deep, primal fear. Fleetmaster Kalen never left his command throne. He just sat, staring into the vortex of hyperspace, the human's final calm words echoing in his mind. We will follow you home. When he finally returned, he was brought before the High Council. He didn't make excuses. He didn't try to explain. He just played the gun camera footage from the Harbinger. He showed them the tiny silver ship. He showed them their best weapon being shrugged off like it was nothing. He showed them the silent, impossible erasure of the Gore Talon. And he showed them the veil being torn away as tens of thousands of godlike ships filled the void. The High Council watched in stunned, horrified silence. When it was over, the oldest and most powerful Vorlag leader turned to Kalen, his voice a dry rasp. What are they? Kalen finally looked up, his eyes dull and broken. They are a galactic superpower choosing to live like primitives. They are giants who have disguised themselves as insects. They are a species so powerful they quarantined themselves from the rest of us, not for their safety, but for ours. That night, Kalen recorded a final log, broadcasting it across all encrypted Dominion channels. It was not a report. It was a plea. This is Fleetmaster Kalen, of the Star Reaper Harbinger. I am a broken warrior, a survivor of a battle that was never a battle. I speak now not as a conqueror, but as a messenger of a truth we refuse to see. We found an old warning. We called it a fairy tale, and we laughed. We were wrong. That warning was not a myth. It was mercy, a final desperate attempt by a long-dead race to save us from our own greed. The entire story of what we faced, the impossible shields, the weapons that unwrite reality, a hidden human empire, is, as far as any of us know, a work of complete science fiction. But that doesn't matter. What matters is the lesson. Let our failure be your guide. The territory of humanity is not a prize to be won. It is a line you must never cross. Don't be fooled by their fragile bodies or their primitive radio signals. It is a mask hiding a power that does not play by our rules. They are not a species to be conquered. They are a force of nature to be feared. We ignored the warning, and 300 ships and the very soul of our dominion paid the price. Do not make our mistake. Let the silence of their space be your guide. Stay away, just stay away. The story of Fleetmaster Kalen is now a chilling legend told across the galaxy. A tale of what happens when arrogance meets a quiet, unimaginable power. If you enjoyed this journey into what happens when you poke a sleeping giant, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe for more stories from the edge of the cosmos, and ring that notification bell. Let us know in the comments. What do you think the rest of the galaxy should do now that they know the terrifying truth about humanity?